Hello, so my name is Katarina Jury, but I go by Jenya Jury, and I interviewed someone by the name of Chin Huang, and he is the financial manager, as well as several other positions since they only have 3 people working for them. He is the financial manager of an alterations company called Super Cleaners, so they do alterations and cleaning. Um, so basically, people take in their clothes and they can choose to get them washed. The interesting thing is that these clothes are actually taken to a third party person or company, and they're washed there for a cheaper price, and then they make money off of the being a transmitter basically of these clothes. But what I learned is that they make most of their profit off of the alterations part of the company, which is where they, hem things, make things fit, add a design or layer. So that is what I interviewed. And Chin is mostly involved in what would be lucrative and beneficial for the company to invest in. And I do want to say these are big words for the company that I personally went into because, like I said, there's 3 workers total. It's a small cleaner business. They aren't too hung up on titles and positions of what they follow through on. So this was kind of hard for me to figure out personally. So Chin honestly does everything within the business, I guess, short of alterations. He doesn't have those skills. But his parents are the ones who own the business and they both have those skills. So they're the ones in charge of that. And I know him personally because my mother, when I was much younger, would get her lab coat washed and dry cleaned there, as well as some, I guess, pillows that my grandparents gave us when I was younger. And so we formed a really close connection with the workers, and yeah, so it is close enough to be able to do this interview, which was great. So one of the most interesting things I learned is that I have seen this company be run for quite a few years now, and I know that they have incorporated coupons, and I automatically thought, applying what I know from this class, I automatically thought that they must be cost leadership. Especially if you were to say like, oh, the people across the street are charging this much, they will match that price. But I was actually mistaken. As I asked Chin whether he thought he was differentiated cost leadership or niche, he said that he was definitely not cost leadership because quote unquote people get what they pay for. And so people come for the value and the connection. So I thought that was interesting that they would qualify themselves as a differentiated strategy due to the fact that they have such close connections with people, and at the end of the day they believe that that's where their value lies and that's why people come back in. I definitely thought that was interesting. Another thing I thought was interesting is as I was asking about their competitors, Chin didn't really have many answers for me. And there could be several possible reasons for this. One being that they're a small business, and as a cleaner, they're not necessarily concerned with competitors. They have a lot going on with only 3 people. They're not necessarily analyzing the external forces that are happening, which is understandable. But the other case is, and this is what he told me himself, is that the competitors don't really affect them. Even if there were 2 other people across the street, people come to you because they like what you offer. And he said, of course, there's factors of, if you overcrowd a place and there's too many options, then people won't necessarily be interested in, or will be overwhelmed and not know how to choose based on their normal preference. But in terms of the actual business and having repeat customers, because a lot of the revenue comes from repeat customers, people go where they like. So competitors don't necessarily really affect their model, which I thought was really interesting. And it kind of took the wind out of me because I was ready to analyze these competitors, and they are not concerned at all. So that was really interesting for me as well. I would say for the first thing I mentioned, where I thought they were cost leadership and they were actually differentiated. I think that totally lines up with what we learned in class. It was just not something I'd considered, which was just another learning experience for me, which was great. For the other one, it didn't line up for what I learned in class because we have been trained to almost focus on competitors, and from my understanding, I thought that competitors were almost the highlight, or not the highlight, but something we should really look into to make sure that we are on the right track and that we are reaching our own target market. So that was interesting to just hear him say, like, yeah, we don't care. I don't have anything to say to that. And I thought that he must, but he didn't. One of the biggest lessons I learned from this interview, even though I kind of figured it before, but I didn't realize to the extent, is that running this type of business is extremely difficult. There's so many problems that can be run into along this way, and costs that can be incurred that are unavoided, which is a shame sometimes. So, for example, Chin was telling me that 5 or 7 years ago, they had a machine that was around $20,000 in investments, and it just broke. And it was their entire way to provide cleaning services. So they had to sit there and decide, okay, are we going to take this to a third party, or are we going to just stop cleaning overall in general? They decided, obviously, on the third party, like I said earlier, and it worked out for them. But these are decisions that are hard and that have to be made. Even when you make that large of an investment, you have to figure out how to pay that back without being able to use it. It's hard. As well as another example he gave me was, sometimes people come in and they are not aware of the measures they've given, or they're unhappy with the measures they've given, or sometimes the problem is on the other end with the person who is actually embroidering or sewing and they mess up. And at that point, you have to either cover the cost of the item, or even worse, you have to replace the item. And sometimes that item is unreplaceable. For a small business to incur that cost, it's really difficult to cover sometimes, especially for a cleaner. I mean, thinking about that is really hard for me. I mean, I can't imagine what they go through to actually deal with that. So it was really informative for me. It was interesting to line it up with what we learned in class. Some lined up, a lot of it lined up, and some made me question more about what we learned, because maybe I have to rethink it a little bit and think about where the applications are with that. So that was my interview. Thank you.